Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello, once again, Talk Cosmos, and I'm your host, Sue Rose Minahan. And tonight is May 18th. And to remind folks, this show will repeat itself Thursday, but in the morning at 6 a.m., and that's May 23rd. And tonight is the fifth week that we're in the Taurus archetype. You know, there's a couple of archetypes in the year that actually have 5 Saturdays as far as they fall in the natural calendar, which gives us good further energy to really understand this archetype. Tonight, the subject is the fixed star Algol, which happens to be 26 degrees. You know, there's 30 degrees in a sign, so it's pretty far along in that in Taurus. So if your particular chart has anything either in a fixed sign or towards the last few degrees, it could be quite an energy that you might be feeling. And the title of the talk is Recognizing Power and Potential Within. Fixed stars in the sky are used for navigation and direction because they move only 1 degree every 72 years. So it's very, very, very slow. They seem fixed from our position here on Earth. In 1900, Algol was 24 degrees, Taurus 26. That means half a degree, more or less. And 50 years later, in 1950, it had only moved less than a degree at 25 degrees, Taurus 28. Again, 1 degree it had moved, actually. And as of 2000, it was 26 degrees, Taurus 10. Algol has a legacy. It's very potent, and it's really the most difficult of the fixed stars as far as history goes. This we're going to confront because perspective means everything. And that historical past that it has associated, there's a lot of mythology, and there's also how it's used today. But essentially, its connection with death and pain, it does thread a paradox of life and death's door. Because shadow, which is also very related to Scorpio, and the full moon today resonates with this particular energy, we could say, of pain, is how to resurrect. It is a matter of integrating inner insights, is my own takeaway from what I've been researching and thinking about, because I happen to have it quite prominent in my chart. And so it's really of great interest. I was so glad that our guest tonight really has given some energy towards it, because I have Mars at 27 degrees Taurus. So this is quite a insightful energy, and particularly through the mythology, I think, of how the rewards of power and creativity can be used, and working with one's shadow. As far as this other pointer that I have to bring up before I introduce our guest is, just a few hours ago, there was a full moon in Scorpio. Now, it happened to be 27 degrees Scorpio. So the sun is in Taurus 27 degrees, which is exactly conjunct, as we say in astrology, what was within a degree of Algol. It's a very potent time, and that happened to be on the West Coast at 2:11 p.m. And if you're on the East Coast, it would have been at 5 o'clock 11. That's 11 minutes p.m. And if you're anywhere else in the world, you'll just, of course, do your time zone change. But that actually has a lot to do with shifting our shadows. So tonight, the guest that will be joining me is Dawn from 6 o'clock Astrology from Buffalo, New York. And she's a Kepler College certified astrologer, both in natal and predictive techniques. And she teaches classes in the Buffalo area, consultations, very customized to those client needs, based on a myriad of needs for timing. Because, as she says, founder of 6 o'clock Astrology, timing is everything. Dawn has been published online and in print. And in fact, she wrote a wonderful article for Kepler College that you can find right now about Algol. It's called Making Amends with Medusa, Kepler Astrological Education. And if you just Google keplercollege.org, you can locate that. So, well, with great pleasure, I'll just say hi, Dawn. It's really been a treat to be able to connect tonight.
I know, it's like a little reunion. Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I think it was, and I didn't mention this with your bio, but you and I are both members of the Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA, which is a wonderful group. And so it's been a real pleasure to continue our relationship.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, Algol, in your article, you mentioned making amends with it. Perhaps you have a focus that you'd like to begin. I have many also, but if you have something that comes to mind, or perhaps, go ahead.
When I first wrote the article, I actually wrote it and I was really angry, which really is kind of, it encapsulates really what Algol is about, is turning that anger that you have into something productive. Because I have my Mercury conjunct Algol. And so when I found that out, like most people that find out that they have a planet conjunct Algol, you get this initial wave of panic and you think, okay, from what I've heard, this is not good. Oh dear, this is just not good. And so I researched and read everything I possibly could about it. And there was a lot of negative and there was some positive. But what I realized was that just like any planet, there's the unproductive manifestations, and then there's productive manifestations. And everybody loved to ride the doom and gloom train and talk about the negative implications and the horrific consequences. But yet I was discovering, as I was researching people that had a conjunction with Algol, that there was a lot of great things to be said that weren't being stated. And so that was really the impetus for me to write this article, was to kind of speak for those that weren't being spoken for. Like, this is a great aspect to have if you just know how to work with it and if you know what she stands for. So I take more of like a therapeutic approach to how to work with her, because I think one of the biggest mistakes, it's a simple statement, people tend to focus on what Algol can do to you, and they don't think about what Algol can do for you. And that's kind of my focus.
Oh, thank you, Dawn. That really succinctly pinpoints a big takeaway that I had looking at all the mythology, because I love seeing what did the ancients say. And I agree with you. It's a little scary. I mean, I always thought for a while, oh, it's 26 degrees. My Mars is 27. Ha, ha, ha. Until I realized, oh my goodness, Sue, that's only 1 degree orb. Meaning, of course, they're connected. And so I agree. It's a little bit like, what do we do now? But I'm so grateful, because in the mythology, well, maybe I should just say real briefly that it's thought of to be a demonized woman who, well, there's so many issues about this that go into the negativity.
Right.
So, yes, and which are important, but I'm just thinking the point that I wanted to bring up was that through the resolution of it, it had to do with the hero person using, well, there's different parts of it, but using the reflective shield of Athena. There's so many, and that's another part of this. There's so many other energies related to this, which made me, I mean, when I say energies, I mean mythological characters or mythology character people, because it makes me realize the energy of transformation involves so much. It's not just a quick click of a finger, it's so deep. But by that reflective shield of Athena's, reflected it right back to the self, because it is Medusa. Algol is often thought of, or not thought of, but referenced to as Medusa, who is, there's history involved with that, of one of the three sisters who has, the only mortal of the three, with snakes out of her hair, which, of course, snakes in our world of today have misunderstandings, whereas snakes in ancient times was eternity and shedding the skin for a new life.
And wisdom.
So, yes. So in a nutshell, which, and we can go back to all the mythology as we do, but it was, as you said, relating it to the fact of, instead of seeing external sight, going internal, looking inward, you know, as the shield represented.
You know what I think, Sue? When I think about it, when I think about the story, it's something so horrific. This woman, she's raped, she's then decapitated, and from the blood comes a Pegasus. Something
Yes.
so horrific develops and turns into something so beautiful. It's like she might as well have given birth to a unicorn. It's a Pegasus, something gorgeous that comes out of this. And then what does she do? She kills a Hydra. She saves people. She's suddenly, in her death, is able to overcome and say, oh, yeah, you thought you had me down, but you didn't, because I'm still persevering. I'm still working. I'm still protecting. I'm still persevering. And that's my takeaway. You know, something beautiful coming out of something horrific. And I think about when we perceive Algol, you know, something that is perceived as ugly but can be beautiful. This could be seeing the beauty in things that others don't see. This could be something or someone that is comfortable with things that would make other people squeamish. And a little tidbit off of that, I noticed that a lot of folks that have conjunctions with Algol are really huge fans of either some sort of gore or horror film, or serial killers, or people that are fascinated by Halloween. I mean, it's almost like people that kind of like that darker, more sadistic side, but not for terms of evil or for wrongdoing, but for the thrill of it. People that have an unusually thick skin. You know what I mean?
Well, I did read a quote by Diana Rosenberg, and I'm not sure who she is exactly, but this was where it said that one isn't able to ignore suffering and horror or brush it aside. That she says that it's that it insists upon a confrontation and to assimilate harsh aspects of human experience in this lifetime, because once you accept and comprehend it, there's power and creativity. But I think too, because Medusa was originally of Vestal Virgil, and of course Pegasus, for those that maybe haven't any knowledge of mythology, was a winged horse, and that seems to be, from when I was reading, representing those flights to heaven. So here she was, a Vestal that was harnessing, protecting the flame of life, which is very ancient. And originally that was a sexually, the men from war would come back and cleanse themselves through this sexual union. It was on actually looked upon as a very purification sense. And the women didn't marry. And later Rome made it so that they were, as they put the women in a different classification, they didn't have any sexual experiences. So with this story, Poseidon, who is Neptune, comes along and ravishes, one way to say it, ravishes Medusa, who is this beautiful Vestal. And Athena, who in her own birth there's this legacy between the masculine and the feminine over and over and over again, which we're all dealing with in a new terms here. So this is one reason I love looking at all this. But Athena was outraged that in her temple there would be such a violation. Well, it seems to me that rather than, what she was really saying is, you're a Vestal that has your own empowerment. No one controls you. Man never controlled the Vestal. And so, and I'm wondering if it somehow with this story that it's indicative of when a person doesn't take their own power and own their own power. Because, there is Ho'oponopono that says that we are responsible ultimately for everything. And so even though it may seem like somebody else is responsible, we have to look at ourselves to really figure out where our part of it is. So I think that could be part of the inner transformation, because you're right. She ended up being really powerful with Athena through death. Go ahead.
And there's so many different versions of this tale as well. I can't tell you how many I've read. I mean, there's the similar themes of the rape in the temple, but the background seems to change a little as time goes on. Some of the mythology that I've read with this story made it seem as though Medusa was a priestess to Athena. Like, she looked up to her, and then they said how Athena was jealous of Medusa because she was gorgeous. She had hair that was long, flowing down past her butt, and the men would come to see her for miles and miles. And this drove Athena crazy because she felt like she was the one that should be worshipped because she was the one that was, the teacher, the higher up. And then there were other stories where there was no jealousy, and it was as if they worked together, and that she was kind of taking Medusa under her wing and showing her things, and that when this horrific thing happened, she didn't punish her out of jealousy. She punished her because she really couldn't punish Poseidon.
Oh yes,
kind of
right.
like making Medusa the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, kind of like, I don't want to hurt you, but this is what I have to do. And then when she was put out of her misery, is how they put it in that story, almost like, have her killed. I don't want her to suffer anymore. And then what does she do? She takes her head, right? She puts it on her, she puts it against her chest and her shield, to wear her for protection, which to me is something you do when you honor somebody, not when you loathe someone, due to jealousy and any kind of, so, there's
and that was Athena,
flavor.
right?
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting. It seems to me, looking at the mythology, it becomes more clear that what I think the ancients that were trying to tell us through their mythology was this reverence for the great source. However, we, in today's language with religions and that, we call this great divine consciousness of the all. But in the Greek world, mankind was beginning to separate itself from nature, partly because instincts can get pretty brutal. People kill each other. I mean, they take each other's wives. They do a lot of things that maybe with a more rational attitude they wouldn't necessarily get involved with. So there is this whole stories. I mean, the way that because a lot of it was oral, talking of stories, that I think trying to tell people, well, you have to honor. If the gods were jealous, it was because you have to honor nature. You have to honor the spirit, the connection. But I also think people felt they didn't have the empowerment. It's the consciousness of empowerment wasn't so much. There was a certain victimization maybe that certain people felt, because life was harsh. It's convoluted is what I'm getting at.
Sue, you said a key word there that to me really, really, again, encapsulates the theme of Algol when I think about Algol plays out, no matter what planet you have conjunct her or what aspects are going to her. Victimization. I think a lot of folks, based on if you read and watch the videos and do the research, a lot of astrologers and a lot of historians and people that write about Medusa and Algol, both astrologically and just historically, talk about this theme of victimization. And astrologically, it's linked to us being victims. Well, how are we going to be victimized? How are we going to lose our head? How are we going to die? Are we going to be asphyxiated? Are we going to be raped? Are we going to be suffocated? Are we going to be decapitated in some way? And really, it's like you're missing the point here, because the purpose of Algol in a chart isn't to make you a victim or for her to victimize you. It's for you to stop the victimization, which is where the strong advocacy vibe comes in with people that have Algol predominant in their charts. These are people that are blunt, outspoken, determined, right? Fixed sign Taurus, that ain't changing my mind for nobody. And these are people that, again, can speak for themselves or stick up for other people. So we have themes of the sacredness, right, based on the mythology of Medusa. So it's protection and it's perseverance and it's defending others that are helpless. And I do see a lot of themes with that, and I can touch base on that in a little bit with some celebrities and how they're using their Algol in a productive way, which everyone should learn how to do, because I think there's, again, so much power and potential with this star that instead of focusing on the negative or the unproductive, we really need to start tapping more into what we can do with her and how we can work with her. And you look at your planet and you look at what house it falls in your chart. And if you don't know, you find a good astrologer to tell you, because there are things that can be tapped into, talents that can be brought to light, and people that can be helped with this aspect.
Absolutely. And when the fact that Pegasus is part of this story, when she is killed and comes out, it really does show that the results of going through the pain of figuring out what it is that you're externally attracted to so much that you just overtake another person or energy, because Pegasus does represent the capacity of doing everything, the divine inspiration, the journey going to heaven, in a sense of flying to the heaven, good-hearted, so there is really that result. It's so true. Let's see, I'm just looking exactly. And after our announcement, which is in a few minutes, I would love to hear some of these celebrities and telling people. Maybe just before we have a couple of minutes, why don't we think about what it is in the story? This whole idea that the eye, Medusa had one eye in the center of her forehead. And again, this comes up because the one that killed her, Perseus, had to get his gifts from some nymphs. But in order to find out where the nymphs were, he had to go to these 3 gray sisters and just watch them. And they were sharing an eye back and forth and a tooth also. Yeah. And so he notices that they were exchanging it and grabs it. And of course, they want it back and they tell him where the nymphs are, and then he returns it. But that eye, along with Medusa, is like that third eye, that part that goes, that integrates and synthesizes internally within the wisdom, the power, the connection that through, it can be meditation, it can be so many different energetic ways in other words, instead of looking for power outside, it's power within.
Absolutely. There's a lot of strategy and clever, cunning, strategic planning that also comes with Algol in astrology. A lot of World War II generals, surprisingly, alarmingly large amount, had strong aspects to her. Hitler being one of them. Regardless of if it's negative or if you're a bad guy or a good guy in the situation, it's the fact that you talk about empowerment. Talking about tooting your own horn. These are people that knew exactly how to work the minds of other people. These carefully planned, structured, very organized, kind of tiptoey ways of going about doing things, just extremely strategic. So, there's definitely a nerdy side to Algol, I think, in terms
Well,
of.
that's a wonderful word. I'm so glad, because Athena, when I read about her, that's one big key word is strategy.
Mhm.
She was born out of the mind of Zeus, because this again gets into this male-female theme that keeps going around and around in different formats. But Zeus was married to Meta, his first wife, who was
Right.
wisdom, and he wanted that wisdom, so he made her. She allowed herself to become the size of a fly, and he ate her. Well, that again shows, and then he birthed Athena, who is total strategy, totally mind, total wisdom, and would never succumb to letting some exterior force reduce her. So I am so glad. I will love to hear your examples. And we will, might be a little early, but no, we will take a little break for an announcement. And this is Talk Cosmos, May 18th, repeating on the 23rd with Dawn from 6 o'clock astrology in Buffalo, New York. We're talking about Algol, the fixed star.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Taurus. By leaving a cycle based upon initiation, the energy of Taurus integrates spirit into a solid form of matter that is tangible and physical. It's an earth sign, concerned with self-sufficiency and the values to maintain the strength of a life form throughout its survival.
Hello, this is Catherine Zumstein of EarthSkyAstrology.com, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Exploring new territory every day. This is Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi again, Talk Cosmos, Sue Rose Minahan and Dawn from 6 o'clock astrology, Buffalo, New York. And it's May 18th. And repeat on the 23rd at 6 a.m. And we're talking about Algol, the fixed star, power within and potential within. And Dawn, you were going to mention some celebrities. I'm all ears. I would love to hear.
Well, there's a lot of them, but what I did was I looked into the ones that I felt really or just had some key factors in leading by example how to use Algol in a productive way, because that's really what I'm all about. How can we therapeutically utilize her for the greater good, to benefit others, to benefit ourselves, to benefit humanity even. So what I did was I was looking at a bunch of celebrities that did a lot of charity work, but a lot of celebrities do, because that's that goes to the territory, right? You donate to charities, you get involved in a couple of things. But then I started looking deeper into those who started up their own charities, people that took the initiative to do something that they were passionate about. Because when it comes with, when we think of Algol, there's creativity, there's passion, there's drive, there's rage, there's anger, there's a little bit of obsession, but in a good way. So people that have conjunctions with Algol, or a preponderance of plants around her, heaven forbid you have more than one, because that's a lot of energy, you really need to have an outlet. And the planet will tell you what outlets, but just in general, outlets are good for anyone that has Algol in their chart, because this rage, this angst has to go someplace, and it doesn't have to manifest as anger or an outburst or anything unhealthy. However, if you do try to suppress it, then you're gonna fall into the category of an unproductive manifestation of Algol, which personally I don't want to be around. However, what I did was I looked at a couple celebrities that had been using it, I thought, in a really productive way. And so the first person I thought of was Billy Joel, because I know he's a Taurus. So I'm like, all right, I wonder if he's got something, brewing around that 26-degree area. And of course he does. And so he has a conjunction. And with Billy Joel, now he's done a bunch of different charities, as like I said, a lot of celebrities have, but he created his own, and it's called Charity Begins at Home. And it's basically they create they support fund, they have funds, and they do charities, and they have different things where they support people that are victims of child abuse. He's huge on domestic violence, and of course people that are victims of cancer. And then I went and I looked up another one who I knew had Algol predominant in their chart with the conjunction, and that was Stephen King. Now, Stephen King, this is really interesting. This is a great way of using Algol as an outlet, because he would write some horrific, scary, twisted, amazing stuff. But that's Algol, again, in a productive form, making something that's very uncomfortable, interesting, and fascinating. Now, he's real big on supporting his alma mater. He's devoted a couple $1 million, I think it was over $3 million, to different areas in Maine where he's from. Him and his wife met in a library, so he had spent a ton of money to revamp the library, and he's donated to schools. He is really huge on preservation and protection, which again are things that really are closely related to Algol. It gives you that passion to preserve something, to protect something, be it virginity, right, within the myth, or be it something that you feel is sacred. And so he was really big on conservation and preservation. There was something called the Next Step Domestic Violence Project that he was really big on, and it's called the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation. And so they support people that are victims of violence, and they support the Historical Society and being able to preserve these buildings that are falling apart. So he was really big on trying to save things that he felt were that need to be preserved historically. And then the last one I had that I thought was really interesting was Ringo Starr. Now, both him and John Lennon have conjunctions with Algol in their charts. Talk about some creative energy there. But with Ringo, he has a foundation called the Lotus Foundation. And he's been known for doing all kinds of humanitarian and environmental, causes. But his main focus was animals that were in need, battered women and children, and of course, again, people that were suffering from cancer, primarily brain tumors, which I find funny because there's the head reference. But both him and Billy Joel had the child abuse and the domestic violence theme going. Again, the prevention of the victimization, right? So I thought that was really something that stood out to me. And I think if I searched more, I would probably find more that were passionate about that aspect. But this is just to give you a taste, so you can kind of feel for the commonalities when you think about positive manifestations of Algol placements.
Well, that is an absolute turnaround for the violence that is often just always thrown out there, because there's other examples of all the dreadful people that died with Isadora Duncan with her neck and somebody else. And I thought to myself, well, if you were, now this is just a slight comment, well, it's a definite comment in the thinking of the ones that are negative that you didn't bring up, that are so often brought up, because everybody has to die at some point in this world, and that is our fate of being a mortal and our body constitution and that. But the fact is, perhaps that soul dying quick was an effective way of getting it all finished. I mean, Isadora Duncan died strangled with her scarf, so that it wouldn't necessarily be what you'd wake up at, when you were 10 years old thinking, oh boy, that's what's going to happen. But the fact is, but I love the fact, there is that violence that's so associated. And those are great examples of people truly addressing the violence that they see and making an impact on it. That is beautiful.
Yeah. And, another couple to throw out there without getting into the details, because they come without, without explanation. You got Martin Luther King, Princess Diana, JFK. These are people that were all very, very into all of them rights activists in some form or fashion. When we can all think of the things that Princess Diana and Martin Luther King and JFK, the things that they've done and what they fought for, and the segregation and just the different things. But that advocate, that natural born advocate, what am I passionate about? What makes me crazy? What can I do about it? I think Algol kind of gives us that pinch on the bottom that says, get up, get moving, and get to it. And she's not as indulgent and as lazy as the sign that she's in would have you think, because she's just too angry to sit around and let things happen. So I think that people that are born with her in their chart that way are born with a certain innate drive to create some sort of change. These are the revolutionaries. I mean, John Lennon, he's a great example of how to use his Algol. I mean, that man was definitely utilizing his revolutionary tactics to get people really riled up to think about things that they didn't think about. He would challenge the media. He would make a mockery of people that were trying to interview him, because in his mind, he felt that he knew exactly, how he felt, what he wanted to convey, and he wasn't concerned with reputation. He had no fear. I gotta tell you, when you think about Medusa, you may be fearful of her, but when you have a direct relationship with her astrologically, you kind of embrace her and then realize that there is nothing to fear. That's where the empowerment really comes in, I think, Sue. It's just knowing that when you feel passionate about something, there's no room for fear. You have your eye on the prize and you just go at it full force, like a true Taurus bull.
Well, that is exactly what Perseus had to do. I'm just trying to link it up to the mythology of it, because here he was born of a mother that also had the same kind of problem as Medusa, had been ravished in different ways, and his grandfather threw the daughter and himself out to sea because he'd been told that the grandson would kill him. Well, as it turns out, he did kill him, but he killed him by a remote accident. But in the meantime, he was fearless, and he went to protect his mother against another king that wanted to overtake. So it was always like protecting this energy overtaking. From notes I was reading about, it says that Algol's prominent among those who work in the mass media, and that it's communication and to speak out, because it is, she lived, there is that in the mythology, she lived way out at the edge of time, you might think, where the eternal snake of the past and the present eats its tail of no ending and beginnings, and would scream and whatnot, I think, to get attention. So it is that reinventing ability and fearlessness. I like that you bring that up, fearlessness. Steward, you have to, in order to reinvent.
Yeah. Yeah, think on that for a sec. It's a lot to take in. I think there's so much depth with her that we just skim the surface. And again, I just think that she's worth so much more into looking into discovering, because I think we have some untapped mental and physical resources that I think would make us better as human beings and be able to serve other people better as well.
And a lot of your examples were men. I'm always glad to bring out the fact that these energies exist. They're seen as more of a feminine or a masculine. And interestingly, sometimes the feminine has what you'd think would be what we call masculine energies, or solar lunar is another way that astrology tries to connote these things. But it's a humanness. We all possess these energies, and we're redefining what is of an equal sense, not like this is 4 ounces and 4 ounces, but that they have the strength. They both have capacity to influence and to exert their own will, which is why I suppose Medusa is said to be one's own god. I think I've read that too, where it's really how that is in today's world, one thinks, blasphemy or something, but it's really, again, in the language that we are our own empowerment, such as you said, the potential within.
I just thought about a female, I mean, there's many, but one female celebrity in particular that has a conjunction with Algol, and that's Uma Thurman. And if you look at her, she's been described as being hauntingly beautiful. And I believe she has a conjunction with Venus, a Venus-Algol conjunction. And she's even played Medusa. And I don't know if she has her own little side astrologer maybe, or if this was something she was just driven to do, because as with most people that have Algol conjunct one of their planets, the majority of those folks have a fascination with Medusa. And those that have a fascination with her and have never had their chart done probably should find out if there's a conjunction, because the majority of us that are fascinated by her are fascinated because we're part of her and she's part of us. It's in our astrological DNA.
That is so, you have mentioned that a few times. I'm finally really listening. I think as we're pausing to really reflect on this, because it's true. I've often wondered about Medusa early on, because I've always loved it, mythology, wondering why was there such a creature? I mean, because she's quite awesome when you consider this head screeching with snakes coming out of her hair and a big eye in the middle of her head, and off in the middle of nowhere, and then she gets killed. So it's like, why was she killed? What is it? So it's this part that isn't being, like you're saying, the victim part, where instead of going within and finding that empowerment of owning as a vestal of the original vestal, which was your own person, whether you had a relation or not, it was a protective of the flame of life.
There is a really good book. Actually, you had the astrologer Petra Tauchert on a couple of times, and she's the one that told me about the book called Revisiting Medusa, where it's a collaboration of like historians and teachers and just people that had their own fascination with Medusa, and it's poetry and different things. And she had mentioned to me, since you have this love for Medusa, you might want to consider being a contributor. Here's her information, reach out to her. So I did, and I gave her that article that I wrote, and she goes, I love it. I'd like to put it in here. So I said, well, great. And she did. So I find that if anyone's really into reading more about Medusa, poems or just different things, different perspectives, even different takes on the myth. The Revisioning Medusa from Monster to Divine Wisdom is a great kind of coffee table conversation piece for those that love Medusa as much as I do.
Oh, good. In fact, Petra will be returning in June. The name of that book again, slowly, I'm going to write that down. Sure. From Divine to...
It's Revisioning Medusa from Monster to Divine Wisdom.
Revisioning Medusa from divine or from...
It's from Monster to divine.
From Monster. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes I grab the last one. I forgot. Okay. I like the divine part. Oh, isn't that excellent? Well, good for you too. That's just beautiful to have publications and well written. I really enjoyed that article that is in Kepler College. Kepler College, for those too that may not be astrologers or those that are astrologers, is an online college. It's based here in Seattle, Washington, and it's extremely high credentials. I mean, of great material. I mean, for yourself, like you have a wide span of knowledge and ability. Yeah, so that's for those that are interested, might consider schooling with them. Well, Medusa in a chart, I think the very fact that she, again, is so connected today on this full moon, where the moon and the sun are in opposite of each other. So that's always the case. The sun is 27 degrees Taurus, which is right close to Medusa, or not Medusa, but Algol, because Algol is it. And, I think, would you say, and the moon is in Scorpio, so we're really Scorpio, that energy of wanting to dig deep and unearth and reveal, out of the garbage, the truth.
Secrets coming out.
Yeah, because again and again, it's like, okay, to find reality, people do say, this is it. I see this and describe it, and we can all recognize it. We have some unity, and we can move on and use that as a basis. But the problem with that, when one really gets into these psychological dimensions, is it's superficial. It doesn't really give the depth. So to say, oh, I see someone screaming, well, maybe they're screaming for a good reason, other than the fact that they're just screaming, you know.
I have a good interpretation for you about tonight's full moon.
Oh, good.
So when you think about the sun conjunct Algol opposing the moon in Scorpio, think about what's going on if you just kind of get an overall global view. Like if you were up high in the sky looking down at the earth, this little blue marble, and you'd hear all these women yelling and screaming, because with that moon in Scorpio, it's saying these are women that are verbalizing their feelings, right? Mercury conjunct Sun, verbalizing their thoughts and feelings, opposing the moon in Scorpio. You will not talk to me that way. You will not treat me this way anymore. I will not be controlled. I will not be manipulated. I bet you that's a very common conversation happening today. And on this full moon, you have the men saying, well, you're so emotional. It's a full moon. You're losing your mind. And you have the women saying, or the men, this could be reversed. It doesn't have to be women, but it's one partner or the other saying, I'm aware of the scorpionic control that you're putting over me. And it's come to light. It's now apparent. My eyes are open, and I'm not going to be victim to this anymore.
Well, again, it is a matter, along with that, of taking empowerment, of finding out, why is this in my picture story? Why is this in my movie? Because there's something within that can release it. And by releasing it, it's in a sense of killing off that part of going through, like, you know, Perseus had to wear the invisible cap of Hades, Pluto, of the underworld of death. And in a sense, to go through that transformational releasing, letting go of one reality. And Medusa, her stare would put somebody to stone. And why? Because that desire, that external need outside of yourself that is so great that you've allowed to take over your, as an authority, yourself, puts you almost like immobile as stone. And so it is really a matter of whether you're masculine or feminine person, but that part of a person to release and the shadows, you know, which represents like the moon in Scorpio too, to and claim it. But you're right, the screaming part does kind of put a focus on the fact of people objecting, you know. I mean, however it is that there's the depths of it, at any rate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, when it comes to Algol, I think it is fascinating, as you brought up with celebrities, how it's placed in a chart. Like, for instance, it could be at your ascendant, it could be at the midheaven, it could be the sun, it could be a planet, like yours is in Mercury and mine is in Mars. And then, of course, what is that Mars doing, or what is that Mercury doing? Like mine happens to be very associated with other parts of my chart. And we all generally, since 1900, have it within 2 degrees. So we all have the same, it's going to be this from anywhere from 25 to 26, just a little before 25 and a little bit after 26. Taurus in a chart is going to be that point. And as you had said, bringing up a good astrologer, and of course you would be an excellent one for this. And just remind people, by going on Talk Cosmos, the website, all of the guests are listed. And Dawn, the 6 o'clock astrology, her website is listed in her bio and all of that, and you can easily get in touch. But so looking at it where it's in the chart, and then because it's in Earth, if you have anything, I mean, it's a fixed sign. So any fixed signs, which would be Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, those late degrees, is going to be quite in tension, trying to express that even more, such as, you know, we've been talking about. Joan of Arc had it with her Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Talk about empowerment.
Yeah.
There's a couple neat things too that kind of give you a good feeling of how she performs through people. Oh gosh, what is his name? He was the lead singer for the Animals. He sang "House of the Rising Sun."
Oh yes. He was brought up.
Burton. What's his name? Burden. Eric Burden, right? Eric Burden.
Okay.
I think I'm maybe off by a letter. Burton. Either way. So I think it's Eric Burton of the Animals. They talked about like his haunting voice. You know, he's still alive, by the way, because I wanted to find out if he died, and if so, was there an injury to the head? Because I always research that. But of course, he's still alive and well. But yeah, they talked about like his haunting voice. And then, Agatha Christie, she had Mercury conjunct Algol, and look what she wrote about.
Oh my goodness,
gruesome stories. So people that really know how to utilize their Algol in outlets. And when I was thinking about the Beatles again, because again, you have 2 out of the 4 that had that conjunction, John Lennon and Ringo Starr with Algol. Of course, John Lennon, unfortunately, had the wound to the head there, how he lost his life. Same thing with JFK, wound to the head. I mean, when we start researching that, you're like, not everybody dies from a wound to the head just because they have a conjunction with Algol, but it is a common theme, and I'm not going to Pollyanna it to death. It's true. There does seem to be some correlations, but I'm not going to worry about how I'm going to die with my Mercury conjunction. I worry about how I live. However, Agatha Christie did have a Mercury Algol conjunction, and she died of natural causes with nothing to do with the head. So there's hope for us yet. But I think the outlets are very important, knowing what kind of outlet you want to have. A Mars conjunction with Algol needs physical outlets. The Mercury conjunction with Algol needs verbal outlets, be it through song or what have you. Oh, and I was going to mention, so Ringo Starr and John Lennon both having these conjunctions with Algol. With Mercury in particular, it's, John Lennon was so outspoken and such a revolutionary. But when you think about the band as a whole, how they influenced the band, they started off singing about these sweet songs. I want to hold your hand, those kinds of twist and shout. And then as they got more comfortable and experienced, they started experimenting, and they got a little darker. And they got into, I'm a loser and nowhere man. And you could kind of sense the music taking a darker turn. And I think with those two, that's the Algol too, giving that outlet through their music to express the darker side, the grieving, the anger, the loneliness, the victimization, if you will. And then, progressing from there, where it got, of course, even more theatrical and experimental. But a good example, again, of being able to use an outlet via writing, music, what have you. I think it's important because that all that rage and anger and energy has to go someplace. And if we can channel it for a positive direction, I think we could really be capable of great big things.
That is fascinating, just to hear your whole synopsis of, yes, their transgression, their transformation, going from using song and then going towards different dimensions of it. That is so true. Next, and I just noticed the time, not just a brief announcement to folks that next week we begin Gemini, and it'll be the Cosmic Collaborations, where myself and 3 other astrologers will be talking about shape-shifting and the trickster energy. Why is it? What is it? And how is it? So that'll be a composite talk, and that'll air on the 25th. And then again, there'll be the next Thursday. It's always a repeat on the next Thursday. So for any of your archives, and if you came in late to this, well, you can always listen on Thursday for the repeat, or else go to Talk Cosmos. There's audio archives, and you can click on and listen to Dawn from 6 o'clock astrology and myself talk about Algol. Well, anyway, Dawn, we'll wrap this up. We have a couple of minutes here, which is great. You've mentioned a couple of things that just really I don't always think of, but that is a haunting. And I've read this before, a haunting look. It is where it is a death. The death becomes, a lot of it is as though that stare it killed people. That's why Athena put it on her cloak, was that together they were, through death, as you've written, stronger, and killed her opponents, because you wonder, is it because the opponents wanted to see the external, and at any rate it did, but that haunting look, and also the violence of not taking it as though it's horrible, but realizing decay, getting rid of what doesn't work is important. We have to, it's the shadow, it's whatever, but in order to get through to personal empowerment, we have to get rid of our comfort zone. I mean, with Mars and Taurus, and I know you are a Taurus, and for anybody in Taurus, it's easy to understand comfort. Things work, they live. But shedding that, as you said, getting off and letting go, and life doesn't stay. Oh gosh, I guess we have about that time. Dawn,
Yes,
it's
Sue.
been a gift.
Thank you. I love being here. I can't wait to come back sometime and
Oh,
talk.
yay. Okay. Send me an idea. We'll do it.
Oh, I have
All right.
many.
Oh, goody. I know it. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dawn. All right. Until next week.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.